my name is Tom Covert, and I'm from Ontario, and now I live in Surrey, BC.
Can you share a bit about your background, your upbringing?
Yeah, so I originally am from Ontario. I grew up just north of Toronto. I grew up there. I moved there when I was about 9 or 10. Grew up there, grew up in a Christian family. They were churchgoers. We went to church our whole lives. We went to VBS. We went to, youth groups and when we were children, we went to the children's church, and it was really good. Unfortunately, I went through some sexual abuse as a kid when I was probably 11 to about 14. So that was kind of like my traumatic experience as a child. Life was good up to that point. It was a family member, so it was tough. A lot of stuff that kind of came with that. There was a lot of mental health, a lot of, self-esteem, all those issues kind of came along, with that abuse. So it was, I grew up well. My parents raised us well. They instilled some really good morals in me, and my sister both. I love them. They really did a good job raising us, and it's just unfortunate that some of the events happened. But, my upbringing and my raising as a child was really good. My parents just raised us to the best of their abilities that they knew how with God.
Can you describe the moment or a series of events that led you to consider following Christ?
Yeah, so that's a pretty big question because, as a kid, I grew up and I knew Christ, and I knew who my parents told me he was, and I knew what the church said. But I didn't really have that personal relationship with him. I never fully experienced, the Holy Spirit or, walking with a heart posture towards God. So it was kind of difficult. And, eventually after the abuse, I kind of grew up and, I went to high school. I'd gone to Christian school my whole life. I went to high school, went to a public high school, and I'm a big guy. So I ended up getting involved in sports. I love sports, always an active kid. Played football, rugby, all that stuff in grade 10 to 12. Grade 9, I played volleyball. And then eventually when I got into grade 10, 11, and 12, I started kind of seeing that there was another way of living that people were, living. And, I kind of got intrigued, and I always had a curious spirit, and I always liked pushing the boundaries a bit. So in grade 10, was the first time that I got invited to a party after a football game. And, I went there and I had seen a whole new lifestyle that I'd never really heard of or really seen. And, it was a party lifestyle. There was girls, there was alcohol, there was drugs, all this stuff that was super foreign to me. And I didn't really jump in, right away. I kind of waded into it a bit. I started off by having a drink here or there. And when I had that drink, all the anxieties, all the depression, I felt it go away. That was kind of the peace of mind that I had. So eventually I got into drinking pretty heavily, going out after parties, and I was going out on weekends and staying the night and waking up and just in a really bad state. And then eventually the first time I picked up a joint was in, grade 11, and I was at a buddy's house and I smoked for the first time. And that night was just that was kind of my entry to the drug, and the drug and addict and all that party lifestyle. And that's when I realized that I was an addict, because I woke up the next day wanting more, not feeling like it was enough. And that realization for me that I was an addict, a lot of people say, oh, I'm not an addict anymore, but it's a personality. So it's not just the using of substances and abusing of substances. There's behaviors that come with it, that they ruin people's lives. And a lot of people don't really realize that they are an addict until it's too late. And that was the case for me. I was in grade 11 and, I started using, and at this time, things at home weren't going very well. I'd come out about the abuse that had happened, so we were involved with legal authorities. We were trying to take the perpetrator to court, and it was just a whole situation at home where, it was really, really tough for me to kind of handle, and not knowing really my truth, not knowing everything that happened, not really understanding everything that happened. And when I did that, there was a lot of turmoil in my family at the time. And that was my only escape, was weed. And, at that point I kind of could control it. And that's often the case, oftentimes I can control it and then it controls me. And so when I got to that point, that's when I was introduced into drug dealing. There was a pivotal point at home where I really just kind of hit rock bottom with my parents. We were fighting, we were not getting along, we were doing all sorts of different things that weren't healthy in a family setting. So then I moved out, and I thought that I could figure it out at 17. And, I started living in a trap house, selling drugs, cooking drugs, learning how that whole side of, the criminal lifestyle worked. And unfortunately, that's what piqued my interest. I got involved with gang affiliation, and that's when I really felt like I had a family that understood me. We were all doing the same things. We all came from we all had our trauma. We all came from a family that had been hurt or that had been, wrecked, or some of them had no parents. And I think that's why we all connected, because we were all searching for that family kind of dynamic, that family, lifestyle. And I had a loving family the whole time at home, but I couldn't really see past it. And some of the things that happened, I felt as though I didn't know who to blame. I didn't know who to blame about everything that had gone on in my childhood. And unfortunately, I took that blame out on my parents, and I caused a lot of turmoil and hurt on them. So eventually, I was living there. I was living in different places, going to different cities, starting to just really expand with the operation that was going on at the time. And it was around that time that I dropped out of high school, in about grade 11 going into grade 12. I went to England, and I came back, and I had nothing to come back to. And unfortunately, at this point, I wasn't really staying at home. I'd be gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, home for a couple of days and gone again. I'd be gone for sometimes a month. My parents wouldn't know where I was at, what I was doing. Unfortunately, I spent some time on the street down in Toronto. Situations came where I just overstayed my welcome at some friends' houses, and there's nights that I spent walking around Toronto, with no money, just strung out and walking around all night, not knowing where my life was going. I had no, intuition, or I had no drive for my life, and I was really just becoming a burnout, to be honest. And eventually I got on my feet a bit. My parents, they welcomed me back home. Things were going all right. I held a full-time job. And I got involved in the nightclub promoting business in Barrie and in Toronto. And I started, working with the nightclub owners because I really enjoyed the party lifestyle and everything that came with it. The pretty girls, the nice cars, the drugs, the alcohol, and just the social status that I began to gain while I was in that lifestyle. And it was throughout that time that I had really lost myself. And, like I said earlier, the addiction that I thought I could control was now controlling me. I spent about $15,000 in 6 months on cocaine. I had used every cent of my money on trying to please, friends and girls, and buying drugs and buying alcohol. And eventually I just got to the point where I was running out of money. I was addicted. I was 130 pounds and I was malnourished. My doctor gave me less than a year and a half to live. And I didn't really know what to do except keep using. And I had overdosed on one occasion. You kind of asked me when was the first time that I really realized that, or the events that led up to me realizing that God was real. I could say the first one, when I had overdosed, I was pretty much flatline. I'd been laced with fentanyl. And, it was a really sobering experience. The friend that I was with, I had done a line that was laced with fentanyl, like I said, and when I began overdosing, he stepped over top of me, got in his car, and he left. And so I was left for dead. And, one of the other promoters rolled up in his car, and it just so happened at about 4:30 in the morning, he was with some other people, and they seen me convulsing on the ground. And he called the ambulance. And when I was in the ambulance, I flatlined. And while the doctors were working on me, and while I was seizing and all this stuff, I began to have an out-of-body experience where it was like I seen myself getting worked on by the paramedics, and I was looking down on a bird's eye view of myself. And that was kind of when I was like, okay, there's something more to this, because it's not just like I live, make money, and die. And there was something more. And unfortunately, that didn't do anything for me. It didn't sober me up. It was actually about a month later or 2 months later that I was still deep in addiction. And my mom had just been doing a teen challenge. It's a beautiful nonprofit rehabilitation center. And she had been doing kind of my intake while I was going through this. And she was asking me, giving me avenues to go here and there, and saying all the right things that she wanted to hear to get her off my back. And I came to a point where I would run into their room after a couple suicide attempts and really feeling just suicidal, like I had nothing left to give. And, you know, she asked me if I wanted help, and I said, yeah. And then I wake up the next day and be fine. And it came to a point where I decided to get help. And it was a week before I went into rehab that, you know, my best friends at the time from the nightclub, they wanted to do something for me. So they planned to really go out and just, you know, allow me to enjoy that last night. And they told me that they wanted me to come out, and I'd been talking to my one friend. We were supposed to go out that week, and they went out on Friday night, and I didn't hear from him on Saturday. And then Sunday is when I got the news that they'd all died in a car crash that was drug and alcohol fueled. And I was supposed to be with him, and it was a really sobering experience as well. That's what broke me. That was my boiling point, because there had been weeks prior that we had taken the same route, and we had gone to the same place, and we had all hung out at the same time. And, you know, God's provision just kept me alive for a reason. Eventually, over time, I was able to kind of begin to mourn that loss, but I didn't really fully mourn that loss. I got into rehab, and it was a year long, and it was in November of, I guess, 2022 that I refound God, and I renewed my relationship with him. And it wasn't easy. I was still in a drug rehab center. There was still an addiction that had to be fought, but you know, walking with God made it that much easier. Walking with him gave me more hope for my life. And it was just a time of renewing of my physical, my mental, my emotional health. You know, I still do have side effects from the drug use, memory loss and PTSD, and all that stuff is still there, but it doesn't define me anymore. It's not a reason for me to go out and do the things that I was doing. I graduated there, and I really wanted to serve God, but I also had to get out of Ontario. And that's when I decided I was going to come out to Surrey, BC, and go to school here, go to Bible college here. And when I came out here, you know, I found an amazing church and an amazing family. And, you know, I found some amazing people out here who really just encouraged me on my journey. And it's been up and down, you know, like our walk is never just linear. It's never just up and down. It's all around. Like there's going to be times that I feel God, that I don't feel God. There's going to be times that, you know, I think that I'm doing something wrong or that I've lost hope. But every time that happens, God just restores my hope, and he restores my life. So those are kind of like the events that led up to where I am today as a man of God and a man after God's own heart.
How do you nurture and maintain your relationship with Christ now?
I would say it's a daily relationship. You know, like any friendship, any personal relationship, friends, family, or a romantic partner, it takes effort. It takes 100% effort. And for me, it's always difficult because, well, not always difficult. I would say it's difficult sometimes because sometimes I struggle to hear him. Sometimes as a man, I struggle to think that I have it all together and I know what to do and what's best, but oftentimes that's not the case. And so it's constant dedication to the word, constant listening to the Holy Spirit's prompts, and really just testing the Spirit as well. I think that, you know, as young adults today, we oftentimes just go with the first prompt, and sometimes, you know, we may have this idea of what we want to happen, and so when we get a little bit of confirmation, we tend to run with that, and we don't test the Spirit. And there's God's will, and then there's God's permissible will. And I think that, God's permissible will. There's things that are going to happen that he'll allow, but that's not his perfect will. And I think for me, it's always chasing and yearning after his perfect will. And I know when I do that I'm not going to be shaken. My foundation in Christ is not going to be moved. I know that, there's going to be times that I make mistakes because I am human. I'm not perfect. I've made my fair share of mistakes, and I still do to this day, but it's knowing that I can walk in that forgiveness, knowing that I can walk in that grace, and knowing that, as a man of God and as a man after God's own heart, there's hope for me, there's restoration for me, and living in that and walking in that is something that, I find great joy in. It's something that, I know that every day, if I lose everything, if I ended up back walking around at night, having no food, I still had God, society's going left, our culture's going left, everything is just going left, and it's like, we need to find a renewal, we need to have a revival in our lives, and I would say, there's nothing to lose, there's everything to gain and nothing to lose. And I think that when you take that step and you really just give it 100% effort and you trust that, you believe in what God can do, he'll show up. He'll show up just like he showed up for me, like he showed up for every other Christian out there. But I would also say that there's a sacrifice that comes with that. It's crucifying your flesh each and every day. You can't be 1 foot in the world and 1 foot in the church. You can't show up to the club on Friday and go to church on Sunday and expect your life to be radically changed. You can trust God and believe God, but it's a lifestyle. It's not just a religion. It's a lifestyle as well. You walk every day knowing that what I'm doing, God sees. Knowing that what I say, that's a reflection of what I believe in, the God that I believe in. And oftentimes people, listen to you and they listen to what you say. And there's a lot of judgment in this world, but oftentimes you talk in a way that's honoring to God. They're willing to listen. And so I would say, even whatever you do behind closed doors, whatever you do with your relationship partner, with your friends, God sees it all. No matter how hard you want to put on a persona for anybody at church, God sees it all. And you may fool every single person. You may fool the lead pastor at your church. But if you're not really walking in that spirit, you're never going to have that full fulfillment that Christ can give you. And so my encouragement would be, take that step. There's nothing to lose. And if you decide to take that step, know that there's sacrifice that comes with that. But that sacrifice results in blessing, results in restoration, results in healing, results in all sorts of things that only Christ can do. And so I would just say, when you take that step, give up your life that you're living right now and give it a chance and see how this new lifestyle is. And I promise you that you will love it. So that's what I got to say about that. It's an awesome life.
Thank you for watching.
Thanks for watching. Thank you for having me on your podcast. It's always a joy to just, go on platforms and spread the good news and support this podcast. It's Tom certified.
No, I can never grow tired of telling you you were